Hey, what's up YouTube? Jason here. This is a video that I've been promising to make for a while, and today is the day we're doing a deep dive rig rundown of my guitar pedalboard. It's right here at my feet. Now I should point out everything you hear in the video today is the direct sound out of the board into my audio interface. I might do a touch of limiting in post, but besides that, what you're hearing is exactly the sound that comes out of this board. Now speaking of the pedalboard, let's talk about the board itself. It was built for me custom by my friend Donnie back in Mississippi. They're called Snob pedalboards, and they're just really amazingly built pedalboards done completely by hand by one guy in his garage. I'm not even sure if Donnie still makes pedalboards. I think he just got really busy with a bunch of other stuff going on in his life, but you know, when the day comes that I need another pedalboard built, I'll probably beg him to come out of retirement. But it has a lot of really cool features to it. You have 3/4-inch jacks, 2 XLR outs, and 1 IEC power input on the right side. And on the left side, I self-installed a USB port so that I could manage and update all of my digital pedals on my computer with one USB cable. I don't really do that too often anymore, so I'm experimenting with other uses for that port. Then it's got the master power switch in the top right corner, a matching lid that goes on and forms into a nice convenient carrying case. And the top of the board flips up to access the storage compartment underneath, which holds my power supply, which is 2 Fender engine room power supplies daisy chained together, and a whole mess of power cables that I've been promising myself I'm going to straighten up at some point, and the first and last things that my guitar signal sees before it heads out of the board. A buffered splitter, by this one's mine, and the Walrus Audio Canvas DI line isolator. So for today's video, I'm going to be playing my Strat. It's a 90s reproduction of a 70s Strat, Texas Special single coils, and a Sur Thornbucker in the bridge. And we should start with my basic clean tone. Neck pickup sounds like this. So the amp sound is coming from the Walrus Audio ACS1 amp and cab simulator. I love everything Walrus Audio makes, but this unit in particular has some features that I've come to really rely on. So this board is in mono. I love the sound of guitar in stereo, but for most of the live situations I use this board in, it just makes more sense to keep things simple and run mono, but I love the sound of 2 amps together. I like blending the top end and the punchiness of a Vox AC30 type amp with the full low end and clean headroom of a Fender style amp. So that's exactly what I do here on the ACS1. I'm running the Vox and Fender amp models, and it's going out stereo from the pedal into this little golden box here made by Simple Switch. And what it does, it just sums the stereo inputs back to mono before it hits the reverb pedal. As far as the cabs, I've been experimenting with third-party impulse responses, or IRs, in the ACS1. The IRs I'm using today are by Tone Factor. It's a AC30 and a Fender Pro Sonic. I believe the Pro Sonic was mic'd with a Royer 121 and the AC30 with a Coles 438. Both going through an 1176 compressor and an API EQ with just a tiny bit of high shelf boost. Now, some guitar players might hear my clean tone and think it's a little bit on the bright side, but I actually really like to run my amps really bright and really clean. I do this for a few different reasons. I like the amps to be bright because then I can use the tone knob on my guitar to dial in just the right amount of cut in my guitar sound at any given moment. That gives me that extra little bit of expressiveness in my sound. Funnily enough, the IRs from Tone Factor currently in the ACS1 are actually a little bit on the darker side than what I typically use. I just thought I'd switch things up to keep myself from getting stuck in my same habits. So this is actually a little bit of a mellower guitar sound than I'm typically used to. So I have the amps running pretty clean. There's not a lot of natural breakup happening in them. I do this because my sort of typical bass tone is actually with 1 light overdrive on. But when I turn that drive off, I like my clean sound to be like shimmering clean, like Michael Landau meets Nile Rodgers, like clean. One of the advantages of running my amps pretty clean is it gives me a little more dynamic range volume-wise. My thought process behind this is I'm helping out the front of house engineer because they've got enough to worry about, and there are certain parts of songs where I want to be a little more out front and others where I want to be more in the background. So being able to control that myself on my end just takes that off of their plate. Plus, the ACS1 has a really great natural sounding overall volume boost in the right foot switch that I'll use for like big leads where I really want to step out front. But having that control within like a 5-6 decibel range, nothing too crazy. It just makes the front of house engineer's job a little bit easier. So the first thing my guitar goes into underneath the board is the buffered splitter by This One's Mine. Before it goes into any of my pedals, it splits off to my tuner, which is the Sonic Research Mini Strobe tuner. I like a strobe tuner because it's just like OCD precise in its tuning, and that's really helpful to me if, say, I need to intonate a guitar away from the house, or when I'm playing slide, I like to have that really specific view of just exactly how in tune I am. That visual reference is nice, which is why I like to have an always-on tuner. So all I have to do to silently tune my guitar is just pull the volume pedal back and the tuner's on all the time. Now, after the buffer, it comes up top to the board. The second pedal it sees is my compressor pedal. This is the Bloom by Jackson Audio. It also does EQ and a really clean boost. And I love Jackson Audio stuff because they're just really well designed, really feature rich, like if Apple designed guitar pedals. And this does a few things really well. First off, the EQ is great. Back when I was running around playing a lot of backline amps and rented amps and just whatever the venue had, the EQ on this pedal did a really good job of making a not great amp sound a lot better. And it's actually got some different modes of compression. If you hold down the foot switch, and you can cycle through the different colors, and these are just different degrees of attack and release time. But when you go to the aqua mode, it engages a second compressor. So it's two compressors in series with each other, which is an old trick that like country slide guitar players use to have near infinite sustain on their pedal steel or lap steel guitars. So that's a really great thing to pull up when I play slide. And I engage the EQ by pressing both foot switches. These days, I primarily use the EQ just for when I'm switching from a really dark guitar to a really bright guitar, or vice versa, just to help glue them together a little bit. And the same thing with the clean boost. I try to set up all my guitars to be roughly the same amount of output, but sometimes pickups are just naturally weaker than others. So if I want to compensate for that, the Bloom boost does a terrific job. Now, before the compressor is my fuzz pedal. It's the MXR Variac Fuzz. It's called the Super Badass Fuzz. So I have a piece of tape over it because, well, I use this pedal board in church a lot, and I don't think God thinks cursing is that big a deal, but it's just a headache I'd rather avoid, hence the tape on the pedal. So it's based on a silicone fuzz face circuit, and it's got this cool Variac knob that basically starves the amount of voltage going into the fuzz circuit to simulate the effect of a dying battery. So I have it set to sound something like this. So as you can see, I really like that really mid-rangey, almost like video gamey kind of fuzz, and this does that sound beautifully. And I have a few other fuzz pedals that I like to swap in from time to time just to keep things interesting. I love the Death by Audio Evil fuzz, another great fuzz pedal to roll into church with. The Walrus Audio Kangra fuzz and filter, a lot of really unique sounds in this guy. And the Earthquaker Devices Bit Commander, which is sort of a fuzz, sort of an octaver, sort of a bit crush synth pedal. It just does this sort of Jack White meets Nintendo-esque sound, and it just absolutely rips. So after the fuzz and after the compressor, we go into my first modulation pedal, which is by Earthquaker Devices. It's the Spatial Delivery, and it's an envelope filter. Sounds like this. So envelope filters are a really fun effect that I don't get to use often enough, but it's really fun when I do because it's really touch sensitive. So after the envelope filter, we go into the octave pedal, which is the Sub and Up by TC Electronic. Now, the big issue for me with most octave pedals is that the octave up sound can get really harsh and shrill sounding, especially when you combine it with some overdrive. But what's cool about the Sub and Up is that it has an editor app. So I went into the editor app and I could put an EQ on each individual octave. So I just put a slight high cut on the octave up sound to tame it a little bit, and it just does a really great job of giving me the octave up sound without being too like piercing. So when it's off, when it's on. So I have it at a little bit of a subtle setting, but you can crank up these knobs and get some cool like multi-voice sounds like Something like that. So after those two pedals is my first overdrive pedal. It was actually my only drive on the board for a long time because this thing just does an insane amount of work. It's another Jackson Audio pedal. It's called the Golden Boy. So it's built around a blues breaker circuit. You've heard a blues breaker in, say, the Analog Man King of Tone, the Paul Cochran Timmy, the JHS Morning Glory. And it's probably my favorite circuit for light to medium, just sort of adding a little bit of texture to the guitar sound. So clean, it's something like... So not a lot of gain or breakup added to the sound, but the absolute best feature of the Golden Boy is something called gain cycling, where if I hit both foot switches, you see the LED gets a little bit brighter. Now, at its dimmest, what you're hearing is 25% of wherever the gain knob is set. Then hit again. Now we're at 50%. 75. 100. So that's an insane amount of flexibility in just one drive pedal just by going through those 4 cycles. But on top of that, you have a clean boost in front of the drive. And just like the Bloom has different compression modes, this has different types of clipping in it. By holding down the foot switch, you can go... And those are all just different combinations of symmetrical and asymmetrical clipping happening inside of the pedal. And the last really cool feature of the Golden Boy is that it accepts MIDI CC messages, so I can control all of the things that are controlled by the foot switches via some external MIDI controller. And the other drive pedal on my board is the Walrus Audio 385. Now, most overdrive pedals get their inspiration from another drive pedal like a Klon or a Timmy or a Tube Screamer, but this one comes from a pretty unique place of inspiration. It's based on the audio preamp in old film projectors, because there were guys who were taking old film projectors and converting them into guitar amps, and it had a really unique, interesting sound to it. So they took that concept and tried to replicate it in the sound of an overdrive pedal. So the 385 sounds something like this. So a really cool, just different flavor of overdrive. It also accepts the boost from the Golden Boy really well. And when you combine all three, it gets really out of control, especially you switch to a humbucker. You get the idea. After the drives, we have a couple of more modulation pedals. Now, I love chorus pedals. Collecting them has become a bit of a obsession for me. I have quite a few here. The MXR analog chorus, a really, really great, affordable, do-everything kind of chorus. I have an original Boss CE2 from the 80s. It was kind of falling apart, so I had a friend recase it, and then someone in my family put a bunch of stickers on it. From TC Electronic, the June 60, which is inspired by the chorus built into the Roland Juno synth. Then there's my favorite chorus of all time, the Dimension C. Nothing sounds quite like it. And I also love having a good pitch vibrato effect to use either subtly or more obviously. The Boss VB2 is kind of the standard in that area. But this modulation pedal to the left of the 385 is a really cool pedal by a really cool company called Native Audio. They're completely owned and operated by indigenous Americans on a reservation, and part of their profits goes towards funding arts and technology education for schools on reservations. So a really cool company to support, but the pedal itself is amazing. It's called the Pretty Bird Woman. So it's a chorus and vibrato pedal, heavily inspired by the Boss CE2 and VB2, and it absolutely nails those sounds. What's more is it's small, it's really easy to use, and it comes with 4 presets. So the way I have it set up is I have a light chorus, a heavy chorus, a light vibrato, and a heavy vibrato. So from clean, we've got to So 4 really great, really usable modulation sounds in one small pedal. I also really love the graphics on their entire pedal line. After that is the Malekko Sneak Attack, which is my tremolo pedal. Well, technically it's a amplitude LFO pedal. It is hands down the nerdiest tremolo pedal of all time because not only can you control the depth and the rate of the volume modulation, but also the length and the shape of both the front and the back of the modulation wave. So you can really make the tremolo into any pattern or shape that you want. You can give it like a square wave. You can do classic tremolo sounds. You can even replicate like sidechain compression type sounds. There's no limit to what you could do with this thing. It also accepts tap tempo. It can also do like auto swell type sounds if you set it a certain way. I've got it set to just a classic Fender-esque tremolo sound. After the sneak attack, my signal goes all the way back to the right into my volume pedal. This is the Dunlop Volume XL. And I just really like Dunlop volume pedals because they don't use a string on the inside, so they're far less prone to breaking. Now, all volume pedals break eventually. They're like tires on a car, but in my experience, these just break far less often. Then after the volume pedal, we get into the delays and reverbs. In addition to my big box do everything digital delay, the Boss DD500, I like having a secondary delay, like an analog or analog equivalent pedal to do extra kind of weird sounds, ambient sounds, if I want a quick slapback or something like that. Now, my favorite delay pedal of all time is the Ibanez DE7. It's a digital delay that does a sort of faux tape echo sound. It's a really quirky pedal from the early 2000s. It's got these knobs that press in so you don't lose your settings, I guess. It's also ugly as all hell, but it has the most magical sound to it. The repeats cut off just the right amount of top end and are a little bit over compressed, so no matter where you set the pedal, the repeats still have some presence to them. And when you crank the repeat knob on this, it has a really controllable, really musical feedback oscillation that you can do some really cool sounds with. Now, I just really love this pedal a lot. The problem is it's kind of cheaply made. The knobs will break. The foot switch sometimes just won't respond. And I've done A/B tests and it definitely messes with your clean signal even when the pedal's off. So I have for a long time been looking for a pedal that gives me this sound in a much more sturdy, reliable package. I've bought and sold a lot of pedals on this quest. Some of them I've kept, like the Roland Space Echo. This is a really cool pedal and it also sounds amazing on keyboards. And my second favorite delay is probably the DoD Rubberneck. This is a true analog delay that just has more knobs than it should, and the knobs go probably further than they should, so you can get some really crazy sounds out of this thing, and it's just really fun to manipulate in real time. I might actually put this back on the board at some point soon just because it's a really fun pedal to play. But currently in that spot on the board is the JHS Lucky Cat delay. I have a little bit of a history with JHS pedals. I used to work at the guitar shop in Jackson, Mississippi, where Josh would bring his pedal mods in to sell on consignment and was first thinking about starting the business. So I got to see the early days of JHS and their early prototypes and whatnot. And I love that whole company and everything they make, but I especially love this pedal because first off, it's bright pink and it has a Maneki Neko on it, which obviously I would enjoy, but is also just a really great digital delay that does all those secondary delay functions that I would want super well. So with a little bit of drive and a little bit of reverb, start with that. And then we add in the Lucky Cat for an extra bit of swirliness. It retains a lot of low end, which is great, and you can crank the repeats all the way and it never gets too out of control. So if I wanted a really spacious sound, I could get it pretty easily. And if I want a bit of a slapback sound, it's pretty easy to achieve. Now after that, we go into the Boss DD500, into the ACS1, out to the Strymon Big Sky. Now the reason I put my delays before the amps but my reverb after is because guitar amps do a natural bit of filtering and compression on their own, and I like putting the delays before that so that they get sort of glued together with the dry guitar sound, but the reverb after it keeps the reverb really pristine and high fidelity. That's a recording studio type sound, and it's one I've really come to love ever since I switched mostly full-time to amp sim pedals. So I'm not going to go too deep into the DD500 and the Big Sky because they're big digital multi-effects and they can do 1,000 different things, but needless to say, I can get some pretty huge sounds out of them. Let's bring back the Lucky Cat, go to a big swirly reverb sound, maybe a little bit of modulation, we can go. After the Big Sky, we go back down underneath the board into the Walrus Audio Canvas, Stereo, DI, and Line Isolator. As a line isolator, it's just going to retain a lot more volume and the full spectrum of the sound coming out of my board than your average DI box. Finally, let's talk about the two utility pedals on the board. Above the Lucky Cat is the Bright Switch. It's a pedal with two USB ports on it. One of them is for a little gooseneck lamp for lighting up my pedal board when I'm on a really dark stage, and the other is for, I don't know, charging my phone or spare camera batteries on the go. It's so very dad rock, and it's completely unnecessary, but it just makes my heart happy. I laugh almost every time I look down at my pedal board because of it. And finally, in the top left corner is the Selah Quartz. It's a BPM generator and MIDI controller pedal. It does a few different things. I'm primarily using it as a set list pedal, so every time I hit the foot switch, it takes me to the next song, and it does a few different things. First, it's sending perfect tap tempo to the sneak attack so that it will modulate in time with the song. I don't send tap tempo to the Lucky Cat. I'd rather do that manually. But the main thing it's doing is it's sending MIDI program changes to the Big Sky and the DD500. I can also send program changes to the ACS1, although usually I don't. I typically stay on one amp sound, but if I need to quickly access a different amp sound in the middle of a gig, I can do that using the Selah Quartz. So the way I organize my presets on the Big Sky and the DD500 is that each bank is a song. So every time I change songs, I'm recalling usually the A preset of each bank. So each song has two sounds apiece. An A reverb sound, a B reverb sound, an A delay sound, and a B delay sound. And also each bank has a C reverb sound, which is pretty much the exact same big ambient cloud reverb for every bank, so that if I ever need to quickly get just like a big washy sound, I have it right there in the C preset. Now, if things ever get loose tempo-wise, I still have access to tap tempo on the DD500, so I can adjust on the fly. And then I mentioned before that the Jackson Audio Golden Boy also accepts MIDI CC commands, so every time I change songs, you'll see the light on the Golden Boy change a little bit. And basically what I'm doing is I'm setting up what I want my initial drive sound on the Golden Boy to be for that song. I'm choosing which type of clipping, where in the gain cycling, and whether the boost or the drive are on or off. So this means at the beginning of each song, I hit one foot switch and it does the work of roughly 7 or 8 foot switch taps I would have had to do without the Quartz. So I've thought before about using some sort of big box like MIDI loop switcher, but for where I'm at currently, not being in a full-time band or having any sort of gig with a permanent repertoire, just doing lots of one-offs and fill-ins and my regular Sunday gig, this setup really works well for me because I can program the songs for whatever set I have coming up pretty quickly and easily, and all of my other sounds are instantly accessible. Hey, little girl, what you doing?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah.
All right, I think that should cover just about everything. I need to get a few songs programmed into the board and get it packed up for church tomorrow. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. I'm Jason. Love you guys. Say bye, Penelope.